Chris, thank you so much for joining us. You seem very well placed to give me a sense of the broad spectrum of trends in the fraud sphere at the moment. What are your sort of big things to focus on right now?
So I think one of the big things that we need to talk about is fraud has changed a lot over the past 25 years. Fraud in the 21st century probably started checks, cards, the internet exploded. We ended up with lots of people shopping online, lots of card numbers being compromised. But almost all the fraud we see now that's damaging, that costs customers, financial institutions, all other institutions money is often social engineering related. And that's really because the controls that banks, payment processors, other companies have put in place require the customer to be much more involved with the individual financial transaction that take place. So if I was to summarize what we see now, it's a plethora of different types of social engineering across different types. That could be an investment fraud that's social engineering someone to give away their life savings. It could be a social engineering fraud that's triggering someone just to give away one code they've been sent on an SMS. But it's all definitely social engineering based and causing us problems across every channel and every payment type that we do as a bank.
Do you think that given the rise of this type of fraud, which is, as you say, so focused around social engineering, is so tightly linked to remote finances, digital finances, everybody not being in the same room a lot of the time? Do you think that we're now going to see sort of that, which still trying to catch up to? It's been roughly 15, 20 years since the rise of broadband internet and it widespread use by everybody. Do you think now AI is going to change that again, and actually social engineering is maybe going to become less important in the next 20 years?
I think the fraud still relies on a lot of human intervention. So if you think of those frauds that are most powerful, the conversations that a criminal pretending to be your broker has on an investment fraud, or the person pretending to be from your bank who's phoning a business and asking them to make payments to protect their account. I don't necessarily see that the AI that we see today, or maybe even the AI for the next 4 or 5 years, could really take the place of that really intuitive criminal behavior that's going on behind the scenes. It's a superpower to the precursor to that. So it's a superpower to organizing the compromised information. It's a superpower to give you the tools you need to create the scripts, to create the collateral that might go along with your scam, the website, the emails that we've seen on the most recent scams that are very professional that go out to customers. But in reality, I think because it now still requires someone to be really agile on the phone to a customer, or maybe on a text message, the bits that they'll use it for are many to bolster their story and to reinforce that. And I still think that it's very difficult to factory generate that, but it doesn't take many cases to take a lot of money to create the losses.
Ultimately, it's going to be upskilling scammers. It's going to be giving them better ways to sort of improve the scams they already have.
And also, if you imagine the sort of ecosystem the criminals act in, there are criminals that will be specializing in building that collateral or building that compromised data set or building that material you will be sending to your victims. And that's just becoming a crime as a service even more than it would be with a phishing email and a cash out today.
Given the extent of social engineering's role in the world of scams and fraud, how important is behavioral biometrics in fighting that?
I think one of the things that, and we've spoken about it multiple times in the panels and things today, is that if you imagine fraud is never just a silver bullet, fraud detection or fraud prevention, you need those layers of controls that help you get towards identifying a problem in the first place across millions of transactions, for example. So if we think of something really simple, a social engineering case where someone's phoning you pretending to be from your bank, fraudster's going to have to be on the phone to you. And for 99.9% of the cases, that's what will happen. So if you're able to add signals into your payment process or your detection process that allows you to see that's an unusual transaction and they're on the phone and there's something else happening in the background where they're delaying or something's happening, you're adding in all those extra layers of protection. You're getting down to a better false positive rate and ultimately a deterrent for that criminal, because if they get away with 6 out of 10, 8 out of 10 cases, they'll carry on. If the first 10 they try that morning they don't get away with because the bank detected, they'll go away and try and do something else.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's about putting enough roadblocks in place.
Yeah, the hurdles, yeah.
Stop this being profitable. Because these guys have got overheads exactly the same as a bank does or any other institution.
And we've seen those hurdles work very well on all sorts of frauds for decades, and I've done this for 25 years. But what happens every time you put one of those hurdles in as a financial institution or a government or something else is the fraud has to change. So if you, as an organisation, for example, limited the amount a customer could send from your bank to a crypto exchange, the criminals will find a different way of getting that money to a crypto exchange through social engineering. So you're always looking for how the fraud will change once you've made a big change to your prevention or mitigation controls.
I've been asking everybody this question today. If there was one single lever you could pull, switch you could flip, that would make your job easier overnight, what would it be? Legislative or technological or whatever it might be?
So I've got some very strong views on the problem actually being a core part of our payments network in the UK. And in reality, APP fraud thrives on the fact that someone can push a payment from one place to another. And if you send £10 from one account to another, it's exactly the same apart from some zeros as £1 million. And people make payments for reasons. And my personal view on a lot of this is, if we're able to take our payments infrastructure and turn it into a system that added extra information into that payment system, so a payment that you make from me to you because I owe you £10 for lunch is a particular type of payment with rules and controls, but the payment that I might send to my solicitor, if that was you, for a house deposit has different rules and different processes. And what we would want to be able to do in that is to design fraud controls into that process. Yes, the fraud might start somewhere else on the digital platform, but if you can imagine what could happen on top of that with open banking and innovation and all the other things that happen in the payment industry, not just fraud people talking about the fraud problem, you build a system in which fraud controls have been designed in from the start. And actually that means that an invoice fraud can't happen in the same way as it happens today, or a purchase fraud and investment fraud can't happen either.
Would you be pro payment delay potentially in that regard?
I think if you imagine what those individual controls for each of those payment types might be, and we all send payments for reasons, to our own accounts, to pay for services, to pay for goods, to pay for certain types of goods, the levers in that process are value, payee, time, and essentially risk, right? So if you imagine that time would be definitely one of those, it's very important I pay off my credit card today. It's not very important that £10 I'm sending to you arrives within the 2 seconds. So that ability to say, well, actually, there's some cooling off in some of those larger payments, but not in the ones that need to arrive tomorrow because otherwise you can't move house, will be really important. And that actually then gives us the opportunity to take what's really happening in the world, convert it into what a customer's really doing with the payment, and bring that level of risk down for all those payments across the board.
Okay, and last question for you, Chris. Is there one particular sort of memorable moment or memorable anecdote from your career which you learned something from that just made you go, oh, that's completely changed the way I see that?
It's one I probably made a lot of fuss out of, but a bit like you, Nick, I spend a lot of time trying to work out exactly how criminals do their jobs. And one particular day, we were giving fake information to scammers on text messages, and my burner phone started ringing, and it was someone pretending to be from the FCA. So I'd started recording the phone call, and I'd gone through all this sort of, listening to what he was saying and trying to remember which fake name we'd given the fraudster. And at about, 2 minutes into that call, the criminal said, right, I'm whatever my name is from the FCA, but I need you to speak to your bank. And I need you to speak to the head of fraud from Santander, which is your bank, Chris Ainsley. And I've recorded that entire phone call. I've used it on multiple media engagements. I got it on Rip Off Britain. But it was that moment where this is exactly how that fraud works. And in that call, they socially engineered me around fraud warnings. They socially engineered me around payment warnings and confirmation of payee. And it was that moment when I realised actually we've hit the nail on exactly how the criminals are working this case. And obviously it was also very personal to me because they were using my name.
They just didn't realise they were trying to socially engineer you to talk to yourself.
And I actually asked them to spell my name out, which is part of the process as well.
Chris, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.